Hello, everybody, and welcome to the From Poverty to Progress channel, the channel that is devoted to promoting an awareness and understanding of progress. My name is Michael Magoon, and I'm the author of the From Poverty to Progress book series. If you stay tuned to the end of this video, there'll be a free book giveaway. So the topic of this episode is what is progress? And I want to give a working definition of progress that I use for my book series. Now, I'm not arguing that everybody needs to use the word progress in exactly this way, but this is what I found the most useful in writing my book series. And that is the sustained improvements in the material standard of living of a large group of people over a long period of time. So this episode is really going to unpack this so we get a deeper understanding of what I mean by progress. First of all, let's talk about what progress is not. It's not about the short-term trends in material standard of living of Americans or Western Europeans over the last few decades. There's a lot of talk about whether things are getting better or getting worse in the short term. That's not really what I'm talking about. It really doesn't matter which generation, the baby boomers or millennials or Gen Z, are better off. What really matters is that all three generations are better off than 99.99999% of all the people who came before them. That's really what progress is about. And progress is also not about today's headlines or trending topics. There's a lot of things that happen in the news, and it's very easy to get sucked up in what happened today or this hour even, or what happened this week. But progress is about long-term trends of the past compared to the way things are today. An example of what progress is not about is when you have progress in 1 year or even a decade that is immediately erased by regression in the next year or decade. Progress is about long-term trends. We're really talking about trends over a generation, let's say at least 20 years. And if there's any short-term downward trend during that 20 years, that might be progress as long as the overall trend is upward. But, for example, if you have a few years of economic growth and then it's immediately erased and then you go back to the same place you were before, that is not progress. Progress is also not a small subset of society getting rich. Now, progress is not really about what happens to the rich. It's really what happens to the masses. Progress is about both the amount of the increase in standard of living as well as the distribution of those benefits to the rest of society. So a society might get rich, but then all of the money goes to a very small group of people. That, in my mind, is not progress. It's when it is widely shared by a very large group within society. Typically, it's close to or more than the majority, but it doesn't necessarily include everyone in society. Progress is not about equality. And this is one thing a lot of people get mixed up about. They say, well, sure, there's progress, but there's also equality, so that nullifies the progress. And no, progress and equality are completely separate concepts. They have nothing to do with each other. Progress is about the increased standard of living of the masses. It doesn't really matter what's going on for the rich. If the rich are getting richer while all the masses are also increasing their standard of living, that is progress. So it's not about distribution in the sense that it's necessarily getting greater equality. It's about things are getting better materially for the masses. If you believe in equality of outcomes so strongly that you believe that we should focus on tearing down the successful instead of building up the less fortunate, then you'll probably not get much from this channel and this book series. But if you are interested in promoting upward mobility for the masses and greater progress that is widely shared, then this is the channel for you. Progress is not about the natural environment. One of the big responses that I hear is that, well, yeah, things are getting better for humans, but the environment is getting much worse. And in some cases, that's true. But this is not really about what this channel is about or about what my big book series is about. Progress is compatible with environmental destruction. It is also compatible with a healthier environment. Human progress and the natural environment are two completely different concepts that are only tangentially related to each other. Now, I will on occasion talk about the environment on this channel, but in general, I am talking about humanity, about how changes over time affect humans. One response I often hear is that, yeah, we've had progress, but environmental constraints such as climate change will end progress. Therefore, we shouldn't be talking about progress in the past. And I don't believe that. There have been many predictions of the past that there would be environmental constraints that would end progress. In fact, we see this decade after decade, people making these predictions of doom about progress ending because of environmental constraints. And so far, they've all proven false. This doesn't mean that all current predictions will be false, but at least we should be very skeptical of how accurate they will be, given the fact that they have not been accurate in the past. If you believe that protecting the environment is so important that we must give up on improving people's material standard of living, then you're probably not going to get much out of this channel or my book series. But if you believe that both the environment and human progress are important, then I think you will appreciate what I have to say. Progress is not a lack of bad events. It doesn't matter how good things are. There are always bad events. In the past, there have also been bad events. So what we're looking at really is the long-term positive trend. And even within that positive trend, they're interrupted by bad events. The mere existence of bad events does not undermine the possibility of progress. And we can see that over the last 20 years, for example, there have been a lot of bad events. But if you compare that to 20 years in the past or other 20-year periods in the past, then it's not so clear that things are actually worse than they were before. So again, this is not about individual events. This is about long-term trends. Progress is also not a lack of problems. We will always have problems. We're never going to do away with problems. What progress does, it often enables us to adapt to problems or lessen their severity. Progress in one area often uncovers problems in other areas. The more we solve problems, oftentimes, the more we notice other problems that didn't seem to be so bad in the past, but now because we've dealt with so many problems, they become more obvious and more inconvenient. But none of that undermines the utility of the concept of progress. Progress is also not utopia. The quest for utopia is something that I believe undermines the goal of progress for humanity. Utopians compare society to an ideal that exists only in their brain, and I believe can never exist in reality. And in doing so, they oftentimes undermine people's belief in progress. Progress is not perfection. It is a trend in the right direction. I believe that the study of progress is about comparing societies not to a utopian image of how things should be, but how they were in the past, and to other societies at the same time period. That's very different from the utopian ideal. Progress is also entirely compatible with entire nations or subnational groups that are not being part of it. Progress never benefits everyone. There are always some people being hurt and some people being left behind. It's always possible to drill down into the data to find examples of groups where progress has not taken place. But these are exceptions to the trend, and finding exceptions to the overall trend does not disprove the trend. It just shows that there are some outliers. And particularly when you compare it with the fact that so many societies throughout history, and particularly in the very recent history, have transformed themselves within one generation from a level of poverty that's really hard to imagine today to a level of prosperity that our ancestors couldn't even dream of. And they did it oftentimes in just one generation. Like we see, for example, here, a photograph of Singapore. Singapore, 50, 60 years ago, were outrageous slums. They were incredibly poor. The level of poverty that is actually lower than sub-Saharan Africa is today. But now Singapore is one of the richest cities in the world. If we were back during the time when Singapore was a very poor country, you'd say, well, there's no progress. Look, Singapore is poor. It's a proven fact that the poor people are left behind for progress. But a few generations later, it was all different. Singapore is now a very wealthy society, and there's no reason to believe that any one society or any one subgroup will be forever left out of progress. Progress is also not an endorsement of consumerism. Some people think, oh, well, you buy fancy cars, you buy fancy boats or fancy houses. That's not progress. That doesn't make you feel better. That's just flaunting your social status. Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. Flaunting your social status has been part of human behavior for thousands of years. So the fact that it still exists does not invalidate progress. I don't believe flaunting your status is a good thing, but the fact that it exists doesn't mean that progress doesn't exist. But just because consumerism isn't a good thing, that doesn't mean the material standard of living doesn't matter. In fact, it really does matter. Go to any developing nation and talk to the people and ask what they want. They want more. They want better drinking water. They want better education. They want better health care. They want to have better transportation, better communication devices. All of those things are the outcome of the overall trend of progress, and that really does matter. So don't believe anyone who says that the material standard of living doesn't matter, because it really does. The reason why they say that is because they already have the things that material progress delivers, and they forget that many people today still do not have that. Progress is also not the sole cause of human happiness. Some people say, well, progress doesn't matter. The material standard of living doesn't matter because not everyone is happy. There's no relationship between progress and happiness. And that's not true. There is actually a strong relationship between progress, but it doesn't guarantee happiness. Progress oftentimes lead to rapid changes in society that can oftentimes be very disorientating. And particularly for people who are, say, more conservative or older, that's a kind of change that they don't like. Oftentimes, progress involves what Joseph Schumpeter called creative destruction, which causes very real hardship in some people's lives. Some people have debilitating mental or physical illness that undermines their happiness in all situations. So there can be progress, and some people don't derive happiness from that. Also, there are just random events, such as divorce or unemployment or a death in the family or some serious injury that can cause happiness. It doesn't matter whether you're experiencing progress or not. There are always random events that can cause unhappiness. But despite all what I said, there is a very clear relationship between progress and the overall levels of happiness. The people in richest countries say in polling data very clearly that they are happier than the people in poorer countries. Within the same country, people with higher levels of income report higher levels of happiness than those who are below them. And for societies that are experiencing rapid economic growth, they also show an increased happiness. So there are very clear trends, a connection, causality between happiness and progress. It doesn't guarantee progress for all, but it shows for the overall society, there is increased happiness. Progress is also not technological innovation. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about technological innovation in this series, but it's important to understand that technological innovation in and of itself is not progress. Technological innovation is a cause of progress, but it is not the same as progress. Progress is the increased material standard of living of people. Technological innovation oftentimes help to cause that, but not always. There are many inventions of new technologies, in fact, probably the vast majority, that have little to no impact on people's material circumstances. And that's why, for example, most new companies and most new products fail because people don't like it. They don't think it helps them. Progress is also not greater scientific knowledge. Now, you could use a concept like scientific progress. That's fine, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I do believe there is a connection between science and progress, and I will soon have another episode about that. But we have to separate out scientific knowledge from human material standard of living. Progress is not about the improvement in the arts, philosophy, or how humans treat each other. Now, I believe there is some connection, and I will occasionally talk about that, but what I'm focused on is human material progress. Progress is also not about optimism towards the future, or what some people call techno-optimism. I really don't know what's going to happen in the future. I am not trying to predict what happens in the future. I'm talking about the comparison between how things are today and how things were in the past. Progress is also not futurism. I mean, there are a lot of people who are into trying to predict what's going to happen in the future and speculating on how this technology might affect the future for humanity. I really am not interested in that. If you're into it, that's fine, but that's not what this channel is about. I'm not a futurist. I believe effectively that human beings are very good at predicting everything except the future. In other words, we're really bad at predicting the future. And when anybody does try and predict the future, I'm usually pretty skeptical about what they have to say. But I have to say that if you look at overall predictions from the past, they're not very accurate. And particularly what's not accurate are predictions that predict doom. Those are the ones that are the least accurate. Doom sometimes happens, but typically when you have a long-term upward trend, that long-term upward trend continues. Progress is also not the ends justifying the means. A lot of people believe today that in the past there was a huge amount of human suffering, and because of that suffering, because of the exploitation of those people, we today now have prosperity and progress. Well, yes, the past was full of human suffering, but that's not a causal relationship. The humans of the past were able to solve problems and gradually create their own prosperity, not because of other people's sufferings, but because of things such as technological innovation and organizational innovation that help to lay the foundations for progress. So today's prosperity was not caused by the suffering of the past. And the people who say, well, the ends justify the means, I don't think they really understand what that concept means. The ends really is not the result of what happens. It is the desired goal of a policy or practice. Oftentimes, that desired goal is never achieved. The means are the methods used to achieve that goal. But that's not what progress is about. Progress is about results, not desired goals. So you could say that progress is the means, because the means do affect how people live, plus the actual outcome. The intended outcome is irrelevant, has nothing to do with progress. We may think about what we want to do, but in the end, what really matters are the actual results of what we do. So how do we measure progress? Well, I'm going to get into a lot more detail on this later, but the simplest metric is per capita GDP. And some people say, oh, well, that misses a lot. Well, that's true. In my book, I go through about 24 other metrics that focus on education, healthcare, longevity, war and peace, democracy, freedom, and such. And what you can see is they all have a similar trend. And all those trends are very closely related to the per capita GDP of the entire society. So per capita GDP is not the perfect means of measuring progress, but it is the simplest, and it is very robustly tied with all the others. So if you want to start in a place of measuring progress, per capita GDP is the best place to start. So if you got this far, chances are you're interested in what I have to talk about. So where do you go if you're interested in this concept? Well, first of all, I would suggest going to my website, frompovertytoprogress.com. With a free email subscription, you get free audio samples, free audio ebook samples, discounted prices for ebooks and audiobooks. If you insist on paying full price, you can go to Amazon, or if you're a bookstore or library, you can go to Ingram Spark, where you can buy full-priced ebooks, paperbacks, hardcovers, and if you want to get audiobooks, you can go to Amazon, Audible, or iTunes. And finally, I have a library of online book summaries, which covers about 280 book summaries on the topics of technology, history, economic growth, and progress. The URL is techratchet.com. So you got this far. It sounds like you're at least a little bit interested. So now you've got to the part with the free giveaway. I'm going to be giving away a digital copy of my book, From Poverty to Progress. Here are the contest rules. First, you need to subscribe to my channel. 2, you need to leave a constructive comment. It doesn't have to be positive. It could be negative, but something that helps me to understand what you're interested in, what I did right, how I can improve, just so I can help to make the channel better. Then exactly 1 week after this video is published, I will randomly choose one commenter. Then I will post the username of that winner in the community section and ask the person to email me. You must email me within 1 week in order to be eligible. After I authenticate you, I will then email you a link of the free download. So I'm really excited about this series. I hope you stick around. Please subscribe and like, and I will see you next time.